Trying to engage with your people? Maybe it's time for some constructive contention. Stay tuned. Hi, I'm Andy McCaskey from STR News, and welcome to 10 Tenets of Leadership with our host, Larry Pendergrass.
Hi, Andy.
Well, we're going to jump right in here today and talking about contention that happens within an organization and how sometimes a manager really wants to encourage that.
That's exactly right. So this tenet describes the need for a leader to engage his or her people by making sure that you create an environment where you have constructive contention. So to just frame that, on one end of the spectrum, you may have destructive contention. Contention where arguments are actually take place in a very destructive or disrespectful way. On the other end, you may have no contention, where people don't feel like they're free to bring up issues and discuss them freely. And frequently, one will lead to the other. A destructive kind of environment can lead to no contention. This tenet is about trying to create an environment where you can get the best best environment to draw all of the right information out and have people sort them out on the table together.
How is this different from CANDOR, which is recommended by some famous business leaders?
Right. I've heard the term candor used. Some people talk about destructive conflict. What I see is the basic difference in the way that's been described to me as I listen to the definitions from some of those great business leaders is that candor can be very open and very honest, but not always very respectful. The examples that I've heard given to me about the use of candor actually doesn't have a heavy emphasis on respecting other people. The big reason you want to not only bring the right information out on the table and be very honest and open, but you also want to be respectful is you need to work with these people again and again and again, and you want to build relationships rather than tear them down for a specific problem you're trying to solve.
It seems that everyone at the base is really looking for respect. Why is it that leaders don't encourage constructive contention?
Well, you know, Andy, I think that many do. So I want to give good kudos and give credence to those leaders that do produce an environment of constructive contention. Those that don't are frequently concerned about giving up some level of power. They're concerned about potentially the loss of power if what they're doing is not being the person in charge, commanding and controlling, as opposed to allowing others to bring the ideas in. That may be one thing that's going on. Another thing that may happen is that if business pressures are very high, if the situation is an extreme emergency, sometimes you do need to take the reins and just make some decisions. And in those cases, you don't produce an environment of constructive contention. Some people believe that being nice to each other is the idea of creating great teamwork, and being nice may not necessarily, in some people's minds, mean that you can argue at all with each other. So being always aligned and never stepping out of bounds or disagreeing with somebody else is considered the mark of somebody that has good teamwork. But that doesn't necessarily get you the best answers.
So Larry, how does a leader create constructive contention within an organization?
Well, that's a good question, Andy. I think that the first thing that every leader needs to focus on is their level of self-awareness and self-management. These are two terms that are used in a great field that I really respect called emotional intelligence. And so a leader really needs to understand how they are reacting to a certain situation themselves before they can help create an environment where people are respectfully contending with each other. And a leader needs to be able to control their reactions, their emotional reactions, as an example. You need to be able to validate other people. You need to encourage diversity among your your discussions, you need to make sure that you pull out of other people their diverse opinions, and information, and the answers will come from many different people and different corners of the organization. So it's sometimes important also to take any correction that you're going to make of people's behavior and take it outside and correct people in private rather than in public. But one of the things that a leader needs to remember is that you should probably be careful about when you jump in and give your opinion. Sometimes you may need to wait until the very end to be the last person to speak. Or maybe there are other times to speak during the discussion, certainly not always just as the last person to speak, because then people are just going to wait until they hear from you. But the fact is, everybody watches the leader, and your opinion really matters. So you can stop and shut down a constructive contention discussion or turn it into destructive or no contention very quickly by your body language and the way you deliver your message as a leader. So you have to be very careful.
Some famous leaders create a very different environment. How are these leaders able to get good results?
Well, it's true. There are some times when leaders can get great results with different kinds of environments. And frankly, there are times, certain business conditions that require a very different situation where you may have to actually take the reins and just say, this is what we're going to do. Sometimes it's because the house is on fire and you've got an emergency situation. Sometimes it's because you truly are, for that particular subject, the smartest person in the room. And you need to lead in a very clear way. But starting with the idea of defaulting to a constructive contention environment, not one that's no contention, not one that's destructive contention where people are disrespected, but having that constructive contention environment as a default tends to deliver the best long-term results as opposed to short-term.
What sort of reading would you recommend for someone who wants to learn more about constructive contention in an organization?
Yeah, Andy, I'm sure there are a lot of great books that would really help us out here, but this is one that I found pretty interesting. This is called Building Better Boards, a Blueprint for Effective Governance. And this is by David Nadler and others. This I found pretty interesting. It has a good description in here about how American boards, U.S. boards at least, can benefit greatly by more constructive contention in the boardroom to make sure that the right information is laid out on the table.
All right, a fascinating topic, and one of the 10 tenets. Thanks for joining us here this week. Next week we'll be talking about doing the right thing for your company, which coincidentally will turn out to be the right thing for your career. See you later.